You're listening to the Live Out Loud podcast with River Wynn and Michele Flamer.
Hi, River.
Hello, Michelle.
I feel like it's been forever since I've said that.
I know, I do too. It's been a little interesting. It feels like it's been a long time since we've recorded together. Hasn't been that long, but it feels that way.
Well, I mean, even if it's a week, it feels a long time for us because we're just used to chatting. Plus, we both have been super busy and getting some stuff accomplished and all that good thing. And so, yeah, it just feels like it's been quite a while. So, but I know it hasn't, obviously, because we connect every day.
We still talk every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's new in your corner of the world? What's happening over there?
I just got done going for a walk with a friend, and we were talking about how well, the winter felt so slow. And then the last couple of months, it's like February hit, and it's like, oh, hi, it's May.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels a little surreal how quickly time is going right now. And
If,
right now, my cat is joining me, and that's
I
what you're
know
laughing.
if you guys follow River at all, you'll know Mr. Whiskers, but he literally, the minute she has sat down for a whole 3 minutes, he has to come over and insert himself
Oh,
everywhere.
he's such a cuddle whore. Like he just loves to snuggle. Like the second you sit down, he's like, "Hi."
I know, it's really cute. Look at him working his way. How do we,
Oh, he's so suave too. He's just like, "Let me get in there."
Of course, the dog is just laying down below me, but Caden's here.
Pets of the
So
podcast.
yeah. So today I was going to do a solo cast on this whole thing about reinventing yourself.
hmm
And then I thought this might be more fun for us to, you know, chat together because it's honestly always more fun when we do it together.
Yeah.
Um, but I just like the idea of being able to reinvent yourself, like no matter what age.
Yeah, and I think for people who've gone through divorce, we're different ages, but um, going through divorce is like reinventing yourself in a way because you're just shaking up so much about your life as it currently is, and then emerging into finding out okay, who's this version of me now that I'm not partnered, now that I'm in a different home or different space, or maybe I'm having to decorate my own place by myself. And it's just like this whole new era of getting to know yourself all over again. There's so many ways we reinvent ourselves too, but I think, especially after divorce, man, yeah, it's a big chapter of reinvention.
It really is. I mean, and that's definitely one way to go about it, right? Is to reinvent yourself through divorce because it forces you to look at yourself. And that's really what reinventing is. It's the process begins with like this deep and honest self-reflection about about what you want to change, in our own life. And it identifies areas that we're dissatisfied in, honestly, and like what we envision, right, of how we want them to be. So
hmm
for me, I mean, I know that my 2024 word has been receive,
Mm.
but it's also like that clarity piece in that for that meaningful change. Like this clarity is my first step towards that meaningful change, but I can't do it without like going within first.
Do you think that this thought just came to mind as you were talking, that part of having a growth mindset or being mindset oriented is, acknowledging, opening yourself to the fact that we are constantly reinventing ourselves.
Yes.
And I think especially like in American culture, we're raised that you have to, do a 9 to 5 and white picket fence and your relationship and you stay the same. Like you get to a point and then you stay the same forever is kind of the goal, right? But I think especially a lot of us who are growth mindset oriented are just really realizing like you're constantly growing or reinventing yourself.
Hmm.
It's a constant process.
It's an interesting piece for me right now is reinventing of how I want to create my career going forward. And
Mm-hmm.
being within this negotiation piece and kind of I had a little bit of a come to Jesus this morning for myself because obviously I know my worth, right? Like we know our
Yeah.
worth going through the career and like, years in, the deep relationships I have with, the right buyers or the right people in different verticals. And when you're offered a job and they put a money, obviously it's your salary, right? Your base salary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding it so interesting that it's a very hard place to say to yourself that if it's a lower salary than what you're used to, that it really means that that's your value, as opposed to trying to see the bigger picture, looking at the narrative and kind of creating the fact that this job will probably bring more soul satisfying. It'll
Mm-hmm.
probably reinvent me in the way that I want to go forward, and that the monetary piece is only a small piece, and that the salary is just something that is there to sort of keep things afloat. But really, the depth of those connections and the way that I create and value relationships, that the commission piece or the bonus piece or the extra perks and things like that around the position might actually bring me more monetarily, spiritually, professionally. And so
Mm-hmm.
right now I'm in this space of re-evaluating this and those old beliefs and how I want to reinvent myself yet again within my career, and
Mm-hmm.
not and I'm really trying not to like fight this old narrative that am I taking 5 steps back, or in
Mm-hmm.
fact by saying yes I'm actually taking 5 steps forward and not knowing the outcome, right? Like just trusting the universe and surrendering to that everything that I've done to this moment is saying, we've got you. Like, if it
Mm-hmm.
feels good, just quit fighting it. Like, just go, just do it. And once you're in the doing of it, that reinvention will start to become more clear for me. I mean, because the first thing I did was say no to a job that was dissatisfying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then the second piece was, like you have said over this last couple of weeks to me, you're literally just allowing yourself to feel aligned in what you want to go forward. Like all these no's, all these yeses, even being offered a couple of offers, and I said no to because I just did a little deeper dive into some of these companies and they didn't align for me.
And let me just say to that really fast, what I love for you is that you're doing it from a space where you're not making decisions from a fear or lack mindset
Totally.
because you trust that you're going to be taken care of. And
Yeah.
you have had enough experience and evidence that no matter what, you're going to be taken care of and you're going to be aligned. And so you're able to sit back and really feel into, does this job, this company, this offer truly align with how I want to feel in a job?
Yeah.
And the fact that you are doing that from a space that it's not fear-based is huge because so many of us out there, how often do we settle for things
All the
out
time.
of a
From
space of
everyone
fear? And I,
yeah,
I want to add a caveat to that. There are times when it is necessary to take a job to pay the bills.
exactly.
There's a moment in time for that. But when you get to a space where it's like you have I'll call it a little bit of like luxury, the luxury to sit back and say, okay, what truly aligns and not do it from a fear space, like that's a beautiful space to be in.
It is. I mean, it is. And that's, why I downsized and why I made all the decisions that I made over this last year and a half, really based on, you know, this reinvention of what,
Mm-hmm.
and the word reinvention has been used for years, but I really love the terms also of like co-creating
Mm-hmm.
or designing our,
Yeah.
like for me, that just feels way more fun, right? As a generator, like,
Well,
all.
you're manifesting your, an
Mhm.
aligned job, aligned career, aligned next chapter. But like we've talked about before, when you're manifesting, you don't just sit back and wait for it to drop in your lap.
Right.
Like you just said, you're co-creating, like you've made choices like downsizing from a big house to a condo that feels really good in the city. And you've made all these choices that have brought you closer to being in the space that can hold that aligned
Yeah.
career move.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, because like reinventing yourself is possible at any age, right? Like so
Yeah.
many people, like you were reading a cool article on somebody who reinvented the way they saw their physical ability.
Oh yeah, I was reading an article because I love the outdoors. I love hiking and
Yeah.
um mountain climbing is something I'd like to get more into, and I'm looking at
Yeah.
some possible future treks for myself. So I've been reading a lot, and I was reading an article about a woman last year who's 78 years old and was the first 78-year-old woman to summit Mount Rainier in Washington. And it took her
So
4 days,
dope.
but she did it. And I was like, that is badass. And then I also saw an article of an 80-year-old man who summited Everest. And I was just like, how many of us have grandparents or aunts and uncles at this age, who are, or parents, who are going into nursing homes at like
Mhm.
65, 70,
Mhm.
and they treat their lives like it's done.
Oh,
It's done.
100%. And I
And culturally, we have that vision of our elderly people too. Like you get to a certain point, it's like you're done. You don't do
total.
the fun things anymore. And
Wow.
how just inspiring is that to see like this 78-year-old or 80-year-old man, out mountaineering.
It's freaking awesome. Like I will hype that up any day. That's so
Yeah.
freaking badass. I mean, a lot of people always, I mean, let's just talk about America for a minute because this is where we live. Everybody here, for me at least, what I see, everyone wants it the quick fix, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, I need to have this tomorrow. I need to have it tomorrow. Like, I don't know where in America's journey to today did we have, like, where we got this from. I mean, obviously the country set the tone for only 2 weeks vacation a year, whereas European countries get 6 weeks, and some Canadian companies give 8 weeks, and then they even give a little bit more based on tenure at their companies
Hmm.
as a perk, right? To like, no, we want you to take time away. We want you to like recoup and have that recharge space or spend time with your family, whatever creates a happier employee. But in America, I mean, unless you're an entrepreneur and make your own hours, you are really stifled from
Limited. I was just
so
gonna say, like,
limited.
as a single mother, I had a family member say to me the other day, like, I'm so proud of you. I didn't think you were going to be able to do this the way that you're doing it, but look at you, you're
Mhm.
doing it because I've taken such a unique course of action as a single mom in a society where our our social life is not set up for even partnered couples with kids to flourish. You look at the 9 to 5 work day and you look at the kids go to school from 8 to 2:30 and it's like even within that there's so many barriers to flourishing in the family unit. And as a single mom, everyone told me like, oh, when you become a single mom, you're going to have to work 3 jobs and never see your kids and struggle. And that didn't sit right with me. I don't want to
Yeah,
do that. I wanted to reinvent what single motherhood meant. And so for me, it's looked like, yeah, I have a college degree. I'm highly educated. There are a lot of jobs out there I could do, but I couldn't find a job that will allow me to be a mother.
completely.
And so what am I doing? I'm working as a nanny.
I know.
And
Like no
it's
ego. It's
brilliant.
just
It's brilliant. I'm a 36-year-old nanny who gets to be with her kids all the time.
I know. It's genius.
It's genius. The bills are paid. I get to hang out with cute kids.
I know.
You have
And
to
they
be
are.
accessible for my kids. Yeah, Friday, I got to go to my daughter's classroom poetry reading. And
Did you
that
bring
was
the baby with you?
I did. I took the baby with me, and it was such an affirmation because I walked in and my daughter just like lit up seeing me walk in the door.
Mhm.
And the way they had it set up was there's different tables and there's like 5 kids to a table. They have their table mates. And so you would go and sit with that table and they would read you your poetry.
Mhm.
And two of the girls at her table, their parents weren't able to come
Oh, because they're working.
because they're working. It's the middle of the day, they're working. They can't,
Yeah,
there's so many jobs where you can't just leave. They only
totally.
make more than a 30-minute lunch break. And so I was able to not only be there for my daughter, but then I sat with those girls and I let them read their poetry to me and it just filled their cup
Mhm.
up. And it was just so affirming for me of, yeah, my life doesn't look how I thought it was going to look when I became a
Right.
single mom, but I literally reinvented what single motherhood looks like for me.
Mhm.
And that's just such a gift.
It really is such a gift. And I love and I have loved seeing you just so much happier and relaxed into
Mm,
that lifestyle. I mean, because there's all kinds of ways that we can reinvent, co-create, and design our life. There's like some of the strategies for that are like emotionally, we can do that through therapy.
hmm.
And, so maybe we don't see someone reinventing themselves clearly because it's all internal for a while until they
Yeah.
make those shifts. And I think you and I understand that very clearly because you were focused on your photography business. I was working, in tech at the time. And it's like we're just kind of doing our life. Meanwhile, we're going through divorce. We're
Hmm.
managing the expectations of that going forward, like that new alternative universe kind of, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then thinking of our kids' schedule and making sure that we're all on the same page. And so some of that reinvention was happening for us internally because we knew there was good shit on the other side of it all, right? But
Hmm.
outwardly, no one's gonna like drive by us and go, that person fucking just had a glow up, or that person just pulled the biggest bandage of their life, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's all these different cool ways that
Well,
people are doing it.
and what you just said, I think it's really something to point out that, reinventing yourself doesn't always happen overnight. For me, it's
Oh,
a process of 2.5 years from the moment I said I'm getting divorced to now. Yesterday, I was speaking with my therapist about just the last 2.5 years and what it feels like to recognize that I'm on the other side of all the really hard work and looking back and seeing that
mhm,
there were moments when I just was in such despair of like, is this ever going to change? Is this ever going
right,
to improve? Am I ever going to
right.
get to a better space? And so just really, if you're listening to this and you're in that space of reinvention and it feels hard and you don't see the other side of it, just like hold
Hold
on,
on,
keep
because
going because you don't know how long it's going to take and you won't know until you get there. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's really fucking worth it.
it really is. It's a deeply personal journey for each person.
Yeah.
And it can take a few months depending upon what that first little bit is, where you go kind of like I always like equate it to like a non-scale victory when you're on a weight
Mm,
loss, journey, because you're like, wait, my shorts fit better this week.
yeah.
Put them on last
Yeah.
week, but my shorts fit better this week. And so
Yeah.
there are these like non-scale victories that are happening, but it's really patience and persistence is key.
Yeah, I like that the non-scale victories. I mean, I was just even telling my therapist about this yesterday of like noticing how my life has shifted in so many different ways. Even like looking at financially, I had this moment where I was like, wow, I think for the first time in my adult life, like all the bills are paid and I have money in savings and everything is great. And I was like waiting for the next shoe to drop
Yeah.
of like, oh, something's gonna happen. This money's
Right,
gonna leave me. And then I was
right.
like, oh wait, no, like I've made the shifts and the choices that have led to a space where I get to be more financially secure and stable.
And it does, and it never, right. And it doesn't even look like what you thought about it 2 years ago. Like
No, not at
never,
all.
but it was just this slow shift. And
Yes.
you were like, I don't know what it's going to look like. See, again, and you trusted in your own capability, but
Yeah.
more importantly, you trusted in with that manifestation piece, you trusted that you knew what you wanted. And you have to get clear with that vision
Hmm.
first in order for the reinvention or those little steps to be taken forth towards that. I
And
mean,
And maybe it's, it's having clarity, but I will say throughout the journey, I didn't always have clarity,
Right.
but I knew how I wanted to feel.
Yes. I think
I
that's
think
what's
that's
been
the
driving
key.
us.
That's
That's
the key.
actually, it's actually so fascinating because it's, I don't know, we're both in this place of like, I want to just, this is how I want to feel with my person.
Hmm.
This is how I want to feel in a job. This is how I
Hmm.
want to feel in my life. And it doesn't have, it's like, it's a different checklist when you're
Hmm.
coming from a space of, I want to feel this.
Yeah, and I think when you focus on the how you want to feel and let go of the how it's going to happen, because if you
Yes.
would have told me 2.5 years ago when I was leaving my marriage, leaving the home that we had bought, and looking at what was ahead of me, if you would have told me that I would be feeling at peace, being
Yeah.
36 years old, working as a nanny, and
Yeah.
just doing my little side things creatively for fun, I probably would have been like, no, no, fuck that. Like, no, I'm gonna be a published author and doing all these big, beautiful things and traveling the world. And it's like my vision of what success felt like was so
Mhm.
different 2.5 years ago. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, when I let go of the how and focus on, I want to feel at peace.
Yeah. That's
Then it
such a
just
good
kind of
one.
like it came to fruition.
Yeah. That is it right there. I mean, and like choosing people in your life that will support
Yes, having
those, like,
friends and
yes.
people that just lift you up through the process. Huge.
Mhm. Huge. I think that's such a big piece because a weekend, like, was it last weekend? I guess it was a
In
week.
San
Yeah.
Diego, yeah, a weekend.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like going to this amazing summit with these women filled with badasses, like
Mm,
venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, listening to them speak. And most of them are moms, and
mm,
so that's also super inspiring and connecting with these like-minded humans and supporting one another. The thing that really struck me for myself was just how I didn't compare myself to any of them.
mm,
And in fact, I brought value to the table because a lot of people told me that. So I'm not just pulling that out of my ass. I almost there might have been a little bit of that moment of, oh my God, pinch me. What the fuck am I doing here with these amazing women?
mm-hmm.
But then when I was on my panels and I was speaking from what my knowledge base was and from the years that I've been doing this, I realized I provided so much value to them. And like, I have three appointments this week to discuss like their next steps and what they need help
Mm.
with. And it's such a joyful space to be in, to know that I can actually help them to achieve their next line of, and these are some brands that were on Shark Tank and succeeded,
I
you know,
love that.
and it's so, and they're just women badasses. And so I think it's really important to stretch yourself and saying yes to these kinds of opportunities because at the end of the day, like they didn't get the funding that they needed where they were going to pay for my whole trip. So I had some free hotel and I freaking went and it doesn't cost, I mean, luckily it's a 5 hour drive. It's literally one
Hmm.
tank of gas back and forth because my car is, you know, new enough to like not, drain the tank or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was just an easy place to be. And it's so cool when people want to show up in that space with you. And it's so like-minded and it's energizing. Like when you're reinventing yourself and you're around other women, no matter what chapter of the reinvention, no matter what, like, it doesn't matter. If they're on page 1 and you're on chapter 10, you're fucking still fired up because they're still saying yes to this next bit of change. Like it's so cool.
I think there's a lot of value in speaking back to that. How do you want to feel in your life? Putting yourself in the spaces that emulate how you want to feel and show up in your life,
Yeah.
even if it's a little bit daunting.
Right.
For me as I'll speak to like being a creative, wanting to be someone who creates, and I create art. during my divorce process, I actually I realized I had a lot of narratives around being an artist from childhood because my parents were creatives, and I
Mhm.
heard constantly, you can be a creative, you can be an artist, but you'll never make money at it. And
Mm.
you're going to run into a lot of roadblocks, and not everyone is successful, and so much baggage around success as a creative.
Mhm.
And then when I was early in my divorce process, I actually decided, I was like, you know what, I want to unpack that, and I want to feel just really good about creating and putting myself out there just for the sheer
Mhm.
pleasure of it. And so I
Mhm.
submitted an art piece to a women's show and got accepted. And I had a piece in a gallery showing, and it was really fun. And I got to go be there for the opening and just be around other creatives and artists. And in that space, I definitely felt myself like making comparisons to other people, but I also noticed that it just felt good to be in that space and
Mhm.
be surrounded by the people who were doing the things that I wanted to do as a creative.
Right.
And I think that when you're reinventing yourself, it's really important to put yourself in those spaces.
I
So
agree.
you can, it's an expansion for how you want to feel and how you want your life to be.
Yeah, I think that need to like reinvent yourself from that desire for growth is so critical. It's like, because I mean, you can create a narrative around the current circumstances, regardless
Mhm.
of like, and look at a glass half empty or half full, right? It's the mind shift. It's that mindset that we have talked about a lot on this, or even with your podcast with Alex recently about
Mhm.
mindfulness. I think
Yeah.
that's part of that, is that creating a practice around that mindful piece, whether you're meditating on next steps, whether you're talking to a therapist, it comes back to being intention driven.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. It really does. And you know, I love how you and I have reinvented ourselves continuously.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we've done it a few times already in the last year.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier a quote from our friend Angela. What was the quote?
Oh my God, I love that she said this about, and she doesn't typically talk about her marriage in this sweet way, but
Yeah.
I mean, because we know her, yeah, and it's 11:11 by the way, right now. I had to call
Ah, I
that.
love
Yeah,
it.
you said Angela and it went
I
11:11.
love
I love when that happens. But she said within her marriage, she loves the fact that her husband has loved 18 different versions of her and holds
hmm
that space for that. And that kind of feeling, and I think we don't talk about that enough. When we
Mm.
finally get to the when you finally find your person and you're like, okay, I'm about, like, we're exclusive, we're saying that now we are in this, like we want to try
Mhm.
to work on creating a life. I'm not saying you tell some, you like have this conversation 3 weeks into dating, right? Like, this
Yeah.
is a conversation though, I think, when you're going to create a relationship, to say, I give you full permission to shed those fucking skins. And guess what? I am going to be your cheerleader. I'm going to be so excited to meet every new version of you, because
hmm
that means that I get the opportunity within my own space to show up as my new self every day. And right, like, I know your head's like what a
It's
difference,
just like
right?
I'm just thinking like what a gift it is. I was talking about that with a friend the other day of what a gift it is to be able to not only give ourselves permission to be fluid
Mhm.
in who we are, what we believe, and our opinions, um, because we're constantly learning and growing. What a gift
Yeah.
it is to give ourselves that, but then what a gift it is also to bring that into our relationships, whether it's with family, with friends. I think so much the conflict that happens in relationship is when one person is changing and growing, and the other person is so locked in on this idea of who they are,
Mhm.
and they can't accept that person changing or growing or being different than who they think that they should be, who they've known.
Right.
And you see that in friendships, you see that in, oh my gosh, with family. Families have
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it's the hardest with families because our families have such a deeply rooted idea of who you are or who they think you should be. And when you step outside of that, it really makes them uncomfortable. And that's where a
Yeah.
lot of those conflicts come from, you know? And I think, you know, in terms of relationship, like, what a beautiful thing for two people to enter into a relationship with the understanding mutually that who they are in this moment of time is not who they're going to be in a couple of years, and to grow together through that.
Yes.
Like, huge.
Huge.
That's
Like to truly be like, let's sign a fucking contract that like bitch slap me if I don't do this. Like I will like I want to show up this way. You know what I mean?
forget the financial prenup. Let's do a prenup where it's like, hey, if we're not
It's an
growing to
emotional prenup.
emotional growth, a growth mindset prenup.
A growth mindset prenup. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's like,
No,
that's the bare minimum. I don't think it should be assumed. I think it needs
no.
to be a conversation.
Oh, a great example of this. I was listening to and I think I've talked about it here, but Danny Morel and his
Mhm.
wife, soon to be wife Jen, they have a new podcast, you know, Finding the One, and I've been listening to that, and they are so raw about how their relationship happened and has evolved. And they had this week's episode actually was so fascinating because they were supposed to be talking about a different topic, but they got on and they're like, we are not going to be talking about the topic we were going to talk about. We just had something happen prior to this podcast recording that we're going to talk about, so you can see our process live. And they went
Oh,
through
I
a
love
hard
that.
thing together on the
Mhm.
recording of talking about just this, of creating the space to not only like let your partner be who they are, and but to recognize that their journey is their journey, and there might be a point in time in which their journey and your journey shouldn't be on the path together, and having the space for that and like that growth. And it was so cool to hear that between some people who are partnered. And it just gave me so much hope for the future of like, okay, that's what conscious creating is. Conscious
Mhm.
co-creating in relationship. That's what that is. It doesn't mean that there's never a difficulty,
There's always
struggle,
going to
or
be disagreement.
frustration. Yeah. But
It's
it's the tools you bring to the table to work through it that makes it or breaks it.
it's how each of you meets each other in that space.
Yeah.
But that's the emotional contract, right? That's the growth mindset contract that you're creating, is saying there's no problem too big, that we can't handle together. And again, like I think we've been talking a little bit offline a lot about the anxious and avoidant kind of
Hmm.
dynamic. And within that reinventing, there's a lot of trust that has to be built on both
Hmm.
sides, and clarity and communication surrounding it. I'm not going to go too much into it because I know that we're going to create a really impactful podcast coming up, an episode coming up around that topic, because
Hmm.
I'm absolutely fascinated about that dynamic. But there is really, for me, I think the clarity piece and reinventing with friendships, I'm like thinking about this new position that I'm about to take, and thinking about what kind of leader I want to be in this
Mm.
organization, and how I want to energetically, and also using my verbiage, having my throat chakra feeling extra strong in those days, of saying, I want all of you to look at how you can reinvent yourself going forward within
Hmm.
the organization, within your personal ability. Like I want to be that coach and mentor in an organization going forward. That's what feels really aligned to me. I mean, closing the big sales and creating, new verticals within a company is totally fits my generator
Yeah.
sales persona, right?
Yeah.
But more importantly, which is why I wanted to sort of get out of maybe the agency world or the tech world a little bit, is because I wanted to get back to creating those relationships and really
Mm.
get into that. And I think, it's like maintaining that new identity can also now be a stressor. So taking the load off, and again surrendering to whatever's meant to be, but knowing that even when you do say to yourself, like, this is that next big piece, is like, all right, I just did that, what's next? That's okay to just say what's next. Like, I'm just open to what's next. You don't have to like create some bullet
You don't
point.
have to control the outcome.
Exactly. Exactly.
One thing I was just kind of it was popping up in my head as you were talking is, you and I have had this time after divorce of reinventing how we date and
Uh-huh.
reinventing how we do relationships
Uh-huh.
and reinventing how we engage with life as a single person.
Uh-huh.
And I was just thinking about how impactful that has been for me. Like, there's so many narratives out there about being, a single woman, a single mother and dating. And you hear just constantly, especially in social media, like dating is awful. It's a cesspool. It's a dumpster fire. The dating apps suck.
Uh-huh.
We've talked about this before. Um, and choosing to not engage with that narrative and choosing to do dating differently of, oh, hey, I've been celibate for a year. I haven't been drinking.
Mm.
I haven't had alcohol in 8 months.
Right.
Being very intentional about spending time with myself and
Mm-hmm.
preparing for the next relationship that happens when it happens and releasing the how and not trying to control. Do I want to be in a
Preach.
relationship? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to sit here and try to make it happen
Or settle for
or
the
settle.
mediocre, the status quo of whatever that is.
I'm not going to date from a fear-based place, a scarcity-based place. Like there's a huge difference between having the desire for a partner and relationship and doing it out of that fear of being alone or inability to be alone. And I think people who are so intentional about reinventing, and I love that word, reinventing how they engage with relationships,
Mm-hmm.
taking that time to do that is monumental because it shifts
And it's
everything.
sexy as shit, right?
Yeah, it is. It
There's like an
is.
aura to that vibe. It's like,
It is.
holy shit, she's not gonna just settle for the regular crap. Like, no,
Oh, I
I'm
had
here
an
for the big
affirmation
love.
night where I was like, I went to bed at like 9:30 at night, and the next morning I woke up and someone that I dated in the past had messaged me at like midnight. And they're like, "Hey, you up for a chat?" And I messaged back and I was like, "I am a single mom. I am never up for a chat at midnight."
No, not unless we're
Totally
holding
shut
space
it
for
down.
not unless we're
And
holding space for like our core people, right? Like in
yeah,
case something like the
but I was
shit really hits the fan.
thinking back to like, even a couple of years ago, I would have been like, oh my gosh, yeah, like, oh my gosh, this person reached out to me. How cool. Like maybe they're interested.
Right.
All,
It's so
then
different.
just thinking of like, no.
Like, by the way, I'm not up at midnight. Secondly,
I am blissfully sleeping at midnight. Do not disturb my peace.
exactly. I mean, it's just interesting. And I think what another piece and like maybe one of these last pieces, depending upon where you are in a healing piece of your journey around the reinventing, whether it's relationship, work, family, whatever that looks like for you. I think it's okay to sort of feel lost within those
Hmm.
spaces. I think there's a mourning period when we're getting comfortable in the uncomfortable again,
Hmm.
or we're able to like look back and think because it's our own old narrative and it's okay to sort of just be feeling weird in this new
In
space.
the muck. In the
Yeah.
muck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that it's short term. If you really like put a little bit of extra effort into it, whether you journal through it, whether you find meditation, a really good friend to I think again it's also stating clearly. That clarity piece for me is I think I swear to God, I think it's like the sub word for me for 2024. It's got to be clarity because it's
Mm.
just something I'm finding for myself that I desperately desire, and it's a huge need for me. And there are times where I'm not going to get clarity around it, and that's okay. It'll be a lesson at some point. But like if I have the choice to ask for my clarity, I am 100% asking that.
Mm.
I think it's like when you are starting to reinvent yourself and you're looking within, I think it's this beautiful place where it can lead to improvements in your personal relationships because as you become more aligned with your true self, you're more likely to want to interact with others authentically,
Hmm.
because when you do that, it's it's like it resonates with you, because again, it's that energetic vibe, and that's why we gravitate to certain people. Once you get connected within, what do we say, like that self-centered piece, we're
That
centered
self, that sense of
self.
self, in IFS, it's called literally self, I.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you are in that space of feeling so interconnected with yourself, it's like you naturally gravitate to those who are also vibing, like you're in the same vortex of that energy.
Mm,
Anything else sort of like vibrates itself right out. Like you don't have to do
yeah,
anything. It just all of a sudden disappears. You're like, where is that person? Or where
yeah.
is that? What happened back there? But
Things remove themselves from your life. Yeah,
yeah, because what's meant for you will always show up.
it does. And I was thinking, for me, I think about the process of reinvention, and um, for me, it feels very much like growing a plant.
Hmm.
When the seed starts out in the dirt, you know, the seed can't see where it's going.
Hmm.
It has no clue. It has no clue what's ahead of it. But it's there, and you water it, and
Hmm.
hopefully it's in good soil.
Hmm.
And with time and heat and water and the right conditions, it starts to push its way through the top.
Totally.
And then it continues to unfurl and it grows. And then finally you get to a bloom, right? And at that point forward, it's like maintenance for the plant.
Hmm.
And so I really think of the reinvention process for myself as like, yeah, it feels like struggle, but it's struggle that's going to lead to something beautiful.
Yeah.
And you're going to get to a point, like speaking to nervous system regulation, because I think that's a huge part of it too in
So important.
reinvention.
Well,
You're
anxiety
going to
and
get to
ADD
you're
are
going to
at
get to a
all
point
time
where
high.
yeah, and you're going to get to a point where it becomes maintenance.
Hmm.
And you're in a new chapter and you're going to have to get used to that feeling.
It's such a weird feeling to not feel anxious every day.
I told my therapist yesterday, we were speaking about this specifically. I was having anxiety about not having anxiety.
Right. It's and especially when you're newly dating somebody, it's so easy to be or think that every time you're starting to date someone new, that it's going to show up in the same way. And when it doesn't, it kind of fucks your head up a little bit, because you're
There's an
like,
adjustment period that comes after the reinvention or the
"Mhm,
growth, the intense growth. That's where I'm at in my life right now. I had a reading with Angela this week, and I know we're going to talk about that later, but
yeah,
and speaking of my therapist, like this is the focus for me right now is I'm in a chapter where I have regulated my nervous system.
mhm,
And I have made shifts in every single area of my life that have brought me to a space of peace.
yeah,
And
that is
my
the
system is
word."
now having to get used to that. I literally
Right.
said to my therapist yesterday, I was like, is this what most people who haven't had trauma, is this how they experience life? And she's like, isn't that surreal?
It's isn't it weird? It's like,
Yeah.
and of course, I haven't experienced trauma the way you have. I mean, my trauma is very minimal. I mean, it's not minimal in the sense that I'm shoveling it under the rug. It's just, I didn't grow up in an alcoholic home. I didn't grow up in an abusive home. I didn't grow up, in those type of real typical, what we consider traumatic space.
Big T, big trauma.
Big trauma, exactly. Mine were definitely little micros that that created who I am today, obviously. So,
Hmm.
and I'm just trying to undo some of that with parenting. My
Hmm.
child is a beautiful mirror for some of that.
Yeah.
Friends are a beautiful mirror for some of that. And relationships, the relationship piece is the final frontier in that healing,
Hmm.
because that's where we really let our raw self be shown.
Hmm.
And so I want to reinvent what that looks like. And that's really this this next chapter is really about that for me. And but setting those realistic goals and timelines and those commitments, they are, I surrender to all of that because everybody shows up so differently. And I
And there's
haven't,
no
you know, I haven't
prescription.
dated a lot, right? Like I haven't dated a lot.
Yeah.
There's some extremes within those conversations where I'm
Yeah.
like, whoa, like, you know, like, oh, I never, have never gone through this before. So this
Yeah.
is new. You know what I mean? Like each time it's very new because
It is.
it's not
And
like
that's
because I'm not a serial dater and I'm not gonna, you know, so I'm taking it so slow with each person, but also okay to take the risk. Like my heart is okay to reinvent what that all might look like.
yeah, you're shifting and changing how you're going to experience relationships. You're up
Mhm.
leveling in
Yeah,
relationships. Each
completely.
time you date someone and it doesn't work out, it's an opportunity to say, okay, how can I do things differently?
That's all it
What
is.
does this tell me about my needs?
That's all
What
it
does
is.
this tell me about where I'm at on my personal journey?
Because the way that I show up, there's no way it's ever, I mean, it's not my fault at the end of the day, right? Like because of the way that I want to show up, it's not like I've done anything to harm, hurt,
Hmm.
or provide like, you know, scary sense or like
Hmm.
safety or like the safety piece. Cause that's
Yeah.
what I'm finding dating from my 20s, which I didn't think about any of this shit. Where in my
No.
50s, I'm like, okay, if they're a mom, like, what does that look like? Like, I want to
Yeah.
provide safety around their children and them and like be a gentle space to land. So if it
Well,
doesn't work
socially,
out, right,
we're reinventing relationships socially
totally,
because I was reading some of us the other day, like we no longer have relationships because we need them.
exactly.
It's not a financial decision, especially for women. We no longer have relationships because I think a lot of us hesitate to leave relationships because of financial security and those kinds of decisions. But women today, we're not looking for relationships because we need someone to provide something for us.
It's so true. We want a relationship, like we're actually in
Yes.
it because we truly want that deeper connection. Like from
Yes.
me, it has to be that way, and it's okay. Like, and if it doesn't serve them, if I'm not for them, I think I put a post on, you know, my Instagram story today. It's like I'm totally okay with that, and it
Hmm.
doesn't even mean they're a bad person. It literally just means that our journeys aren't aligned. We're not
Yeah.
aligned in this space and time.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
Yeah.
And I find it to be interesting. I find it to be, I mean, sometimes it's a little sad. You know, it's sad because you think, wow, they're choosing themselves in this moment, which is fine for them. But you're also just feeling sad because you might have been, you know, you might have enjoyed the
You
conversation.
enjoyed them. You got to know them.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not we're humans. We're souls having a human experience and
Exactly.
emotions are real and feeling a way towards a person and enjoying them. Of course, there's going to be emotion when things don't work out with someone, but it's how you interact with those emotions, right? You feel the feels, but you also recognize that this was just this served a purpose. We
Right.
grew,
Like I
we
dodged a
learned.
bullet or there's a new door coming, you know,
There's
whatever.
something what I keep telling myself is, in my dating experience since leaving the marriage I was in, every single time I dated someone, it got better. It
Yeah.
got better and better and better. And, I dated three people, talked to another person in the last 2.5 years.
Right.
Brief, like we're talking like a couple of weeks or, 2 months
Hmm.
to someone long distance. And each time it gave me the opportunity to shift everything about how I interact with relationships. But not only that, I look back now and I'm like, oh, I trust now that I'm dating from a place and going into relationship from a place of wanting it, desiring it, but not needing it and trusting that it's
Right.
going to be good because I look back and I'm like, every single one of those experiences, it got better each
Mhm.
time. So it's only going to keep better. So the next person I'm with, like, it's probably going to blow my fucking mind.
And that's the beauty of it all, right? It's like being able to reinvent ourselves, not to the point, to the point that we just feel really solid, and
Yeah.
balancing that reinvention within responsibilities. Sometimes we have to prioritize it and say no to things we might
Hmm.
want to say no to. It sometimes involves, careful planning around things like that. So I think the main thing is people need to set realistic goals for themselves. They
Hmm.
don't have to change everything overnight. There are people who are like me. I ended up losing a job because of reorg. Then my house was on the market. It's like all these things all at once. And sometimes it
Hmm.
happens that way, but it only happens that way because the universe knows you can actually hold space for it, and you can actually
Yeah. And that's where you
handle
really
it.
can't compare your journey to anyone
That's
else's.
right.
I remember, a couple of months after my divorce process started, I got really frustrated because I had a friend who literally left her marriage at the same time that I did. And within 6 months, she had met the person who is her soulmate, and they got married very quickly and have had two children since then.
Amazing.
And I remember seeing that and feeling so frustrated of like, why does that person get to have that?
You had that
You know,
comparison
the
syndrome.
comparison. And now I'm like, I look back at my last 2.5 years and I'm like, if I had met my soulmate 6 months after leaving my marriage, um, I would not have been ready for that.
Hmm.
Everything that has happened in the last 2.5 years was very purposeful for
You were
me.
not ready. Yeah, you weren't ready for what you want, like the
I
relationship that
I
you're
couldn't bring to the table what I wanted.
right.
I wasn't the partner that I wanted to have.
That's right.
So if I had met that person, they probably wouldn't have actually wanted to date me because I couldn't have shown up for them in the way
Mhm.
that I wanted someone to show up for me. So the
Yeah,
last 2.5 years have been so purposeful
right. Because you
in me
yourself,
becoming a person.
yeah, you yourself are becoming the right partner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't compare your journey. Don't
No,
compare
don't
your
compare
journey.
your journey. Hey, I freaking love this conversation.
This was such a good one.
It was juicy.
Juicy,
And I
multiple
like and I like
lenses.
and I like the lens we were looking through.
And can I just say, because I'm going to share a photo of it on the podcast Instagram, but I have a beautiful new mic.
Oh, yes, you do. Yeah. The pink princess.
It's a very beautiful, hilarious looking pink mic. I will share a photo of it later.
I mean, it looks like a mic. It's just funny because, mics. Anyways, love you, friend.
Love you, friend. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode today, be sure to subscribe and share because what do we say, baby?
Sharing is caring.